The year was 1984. Ronald Reagan was president, Michael Jackson's at the top of the charts, and Team Associated releases the RC10 buggy. Right away, the RC10 becomes the car to beat on the track and begins winning races all over the world. With the success of the RC10, the engineers at Team Associated were planning their next step. In the early days of racing, tracks were rough, loose, and inconsistent, so it was obvious that the car with four-wheel drive would handle the tracks of that era much better than two-wheel drive. Team Associated engineer and founder Roger Curtis, with the help of machinist Curtis Husting, decided to refine a home-built four-wheel buggy that was given to them by a friend of Jay Halsey. With very limited time and the first IFMAR World Championships in Del Mar, California happening the following year, the plan was to have a car ready for Jay Halsey to race in the four-wheel drive class.
So they were kicking around some things, and there was a guy that was like an ex three-wheeler racer at the time, Dan Lamy, and he kind of handmade a car and brought it to Associated. And I remember I was getting very close to the Worlds, and we didn't have anything. And so they kind of went with that and machined all the parts instead of all handmade parts, machined all the parts.
There's a lot of issues that just even making the car, there's so many parts it's in the front end. We had to make caster blocks, steering blocks, dog bones, front transmission case, the chain drive, and then the whole rear end trying to adapt the third shaft or the extra shaft, lay shaft to go from the rear to the front. Just trying to build the car and able to go run, that was probably the biggest challenge. Just being able to physically make the parts, enough parts on time to be able to race that race.
Wow, I was amazed at how well, they was getting around with it. It was quite amazing. But the market was, another thing was, the additional cost and the market for two-wheel drive was really good for us, and at the time we just didn't think it would be worthwhile to try to compete in that field, so we just stayed with it with two-wheel for quite a long time.
But I mean, it was right to the wire. My family, my mom, my dad and I, we camped at a campground right next to where the track was in Del Mar at the Worlds. And I remember Roger bringing the car down there a few days before, and right in our campsite, we're working on it, putting it together and fitting everything. I mean, it had never even been assembled, really.
Seeing the success of the RC10 buggy, it wouldn't take long for other companies to recognize the potential for a four-wheel drive option. Eustace Moore of Moore's Ideal Products, better known as MIP, saw the potential for a four-wheel drive RC10 and decided it was time to release a conversion kit.
In the late 70s, 79, right as it turned into 80 and early 80s, I was working on four-wheel drive projects then for the Tamiya cars, and I was constructing my own design. So I was working with the four-wheel drive concepts back then. After they released the RC10, once we developed the transmission for it, kind of gave us a base to work from of something that was had high performance characteristics and standards compared to the other cars. They were winning everything back then. So we just tried to incorporate those characteristics into what we thought would be an excellent four-wheel car.
After some R&D, MIP released their first version of the RC10 four-wheel drive conversion, dubbed the custom 4X120 four-wheel drive conversion kit.
Yeah, the very first four-wheel drive was cable drive, and that was derived from the prior cars that were also cable drive. When we initially did projects, there wasn't really room to get something down the center of the car or over the chassis. So I decided basically, so maybe we can run something around it. And it actually worked quite well. The efficiency was low, but it actually kind of did the job. And the reliability wasn't quite there, but when the car performed well, it did.
Over the next several years, the RC10 chassis didn't change much, allowing MIP to continue to improve the design of their four-wheel drive conversion. In 1987, MIP released the SP2 four-wheel drive kit, which used a chain instead of a cable for better reliability and efficiency. A year later, the chain was replaced with a belt, and it remained that way until 1990 when the RC10 team car with stealth transmission was released. MIP updated the conversion again to accommodate the new transmission, calling it the 410 Legend conversion. Due to such a high demand for the two-wheel drive, as well as a gentleman's agreement with Japanese manufacturer Yokomo, Team Associated decided not to release a four-wheel drive version of the RC10.
Oh, well, it went back to the very early days of 8-scale on-road racing. He started dealing with Yokomo back in 1972 or so. We first came out with the RC1, and that Yokomo came to us and they wanted to sell our car in Japan, so we made an arrangement with them, and we had a very close relationship with them for all those years from 1972 on.
Between both teams, design teams, trying to use both design teams efficiently, not all the companies back then could design cars for every category. They didn't have the capacity. So some partnerships formed between companies. We did two-wheel drive, they did four-wheel drive. Their racing team drove our two-wheel drive, our racing team drove their four-wheel drive. And the relationship between Yokomo has been strong for many, many years. But it has changed over time because now, both companies make products in more categories, and we tend to compete with each other on the racetrack. We're fierce competitors. Off the track, we're strong business allies.
In the late 90s, as touring car was gaining popularity, Team Associated recognized the potential and had a revolutionary idea to change the class. In 1999, the shaft-driven TC3 was debuted and immediately took center stage in the touring car world, specifically catching the eye of European off-road racer Gerd Strange and US-based company RC Products Design. They weren't interested in the TC3 for its on-road purpose, but rather for its off-road use. With the highly efficient drivetrain and steering rack design, both developed their versions of the TC3 four-wheel drive buggy, RCPD with the TC3O and Gerd with a Durango. With the addition of a slipper clutch from an RC10 B3, Gerd's Durango would quickly become the vehicle of choice. The following year, having attended several local area races, it was E.B. Beck who would take first place at the German Nationals, giving the buggy its first major victory. This prompted Gerd to bring the prototype buggy to the 2001 Reedy Off-Road Race of Champions. Still in its prototype stage, he gets Team Associated drivers Billy Easton and Mark Pavitas to wheel the new design before the event.
All of our competition was like, oh, why are you running that? It's that's a touring car with off-road suspension. It'll never work, And I think we surprised a lot of people just on how quick it was, for a car that wasn't a true off-road car. When Gerd presented this shaft drive car to Associated and said, hey, would you guys want to try this out? It was more in the direction that we felt an off-road four-wheel drive car could be.
At the 2001 IFMAR Worlds in South Africa, both Billy and Mark raced the Durango, but it was Mark who made it into the A main, coming in 6th place overall. Later that year, Team Associated European driver Craig Drescher took 3rd at the European Championships, proving the design was headed in the right direction.
For me at the time, it was a difficult one because I was racing more touring car than anything else at that time. I dropped into touring car, I was competitive in the touring car, we've done lots of development with TC3. So dropping back into off-road for me was kind of picking and choosing what I thought was a good time, which was a luxury. I thought it was potentially a good option, so I contacted Gerd, and we'd had brief communications before that at LRP races. I'd seen the car there as well, and he said yes, he'd like me to run it. For the most part, I mean, you always want to win, but I was realistic, and I think 3rd was a real achievement at the time, and could have been a little bit better, but it could have also been a lot worse. So I was very happy with the outcome.
In 2003, Team Associated dedicated more resources to the Durango project and allowed Gerd to supply several team drivers with four-wheel drive buggies for various races. Up until then, Team Associated driver Neil Craig was working together with RCPD and their TC30, but opted for a deal with Yokomo in the four-wheel drive class.
So the reason that we left the TC30 because it was put together in some guy's garage basically. It wasn't a production car. It wasn't something that was ever going to have any distance in it. So, and we were just looking for something to run production car, And the distribution company from England, CML, they were bringing in Yokomo at the time. They needed a driver to run their four-wheel drive. It kind of just fell perfectly. Associated didn't do a four-wheel drive back then. So, yeah, we ended up running the four-wheel drive and, kind of taking it on from there.
In the US, where two-wheel truck was the dominant second class, drivers were frustrated with a lack of four-wheel drive options. So Associated drivers Jason Rona and Brad Relfs designed and built prototype four-wheel buggies to be raced at the 2003 IFMAR Worlds in Clearwater, Florida. That design would go on to become the Jay Concepts BJ4. It was here where Rona proved the design in competition, placing 13th overall. With that success, Jason and Brad decided to produce a small run of BJ4s in July of the following year, jumping headfirst into the four-wheel drive class and forming Jay Concepts.
The car thing was an idea that kind of came to me after Brad approached and said, hey, I want to custom build this car. And I said, I think we can do it. I have the experience behind the computer where we can design these components and have them made in time and try to build this car. We built this thing and we went straight out to practice at the Worlds with it, and everything that needed to be made was made in this, probably this 3-week window. We used every amount of time we could all the way up until the race, and we got it on the track for the official practice, and it worked really well. Right away you could tell that, this thing kind of had something. The very first battery pack, I kind of came off the track and was like, I'm feeling pretty good about this, pretty comfortable, and it kind of felt like it was supposed to feel, in my opinion. And but it was until I got back to the pits when other people were really, really surprised that they're like, wow, this thing looks really good. And other guys are like, wow, did you look at your lap times? And I'm like, I haven't looked yet, but it felt pretty good. And they're like, wow, you're one of the faster guys. Right away, it kind of reassured to me that my opinion of the actual feel of the way the car felt to me on the track did translate into the lap times, and other people could see that. A couple photos landed somewhere on a forum or the internet, and you could see people were really eager to have another four-wheel drive car, and maybe once they found out that I was involved and Brad was involved, that they really they wanted to see it happen. They wanted one for themselves. It was kind of like no matter what the price, they just wanted to have one.
Being in the media, we saw a lot of four-wheel drive cars come and go. We had just come off of a time where four-wheel drive was a class that at one point was very busy, and it was sort of the premier class to be in, and all of a sudden it was like 2 competitors that were left. But when the BJ4 came along, it was really the first kind of production level four-wheel drive car based on a TC3, and it was something that was going to really change things, and that's exactly what it did. It made four-wheel drive competitive again to a point where Associated could drive it, everybody else could get one, and it really took the class to a different level. Right after that, we saw about 5 or 6 different four-wheel drive buggies came out, and I think that the BJ4 could be really considered the one that's responsible for bringing back the four-wheel drive class.
Over the next 3 years, Jay Concepts, together with many Team Associated drivers, achieved a long list of victories with the BJ4. But the springboard of success came with Ryan Mayfield's TQ and Ryan Cavallari's win at the 2005 IFMAR Worlds in Italy, cementing the demand for the BJ4.
I joined Associated in 2005. We raced the BJ4, and it was an incredible car. It was so fast, nimble, and we won a lot of races. we had Jason and Brad. So it made us even better since we had personal mechanics. We could focus on the task in hand with all the associated cars plus the J Concept BJ4. So we were pretty dominant. We actually transferred to the Saddle Pack car for the Worlds. So that was the first time I ever ran that car. Mayfield did some testing after the Nationals in Connecticut, and we were running a stick pack car at the time. And I went to the Worlds warm up, and we kind of got our butt beat pretty bad. So Jason came back, did some engineering, and we had pretty much a prototype chassis for the Worlds, and went out with a TQ and winning. So definitely accomplished our goals in that, and pretty much had a car for a numerous amount of years that same way, and now we're running a single pack shorty.
Ryan proved to be as cool as ice on the stand as he always is, but I think his win in Italy was really what kind of set the mark not only for the BJ4 but also for Ryan. He went on to dominate and continues to dominate both four-wheel drive and two-wheel drive for Associated. But I think the BJ4 win in Italy was really the first time that really left a mark for everybody else of what was to come.
By 2007, J Concepts, along with Team Associated, were still winning races with the BJ4. However, with the demand and success of the BJ4, it was time for a true production buggy to take the reins. So J Concepts made the decision to give the BJ4 the production run it deserved and sold the design to Team Associated. Working in continued collaboration with Team Associated's Area 51 design team, Jason Rona and Brad Relfs helped develop a new champion buggy utilizing the BJ4 Worlds Edition concept, and the factory team RC10 B44 was born.
The transition from being a car that I raced and that people were interested on how it's performing and that they were able to get it, it quickly went to the top end drivers, and they were interested in the car. And when they were interested in the car and they started winning with it, I think is when Associated realized that they needed to be in the four-wheel drive market. It was something that they haven't had throughout their history, and they realized that, hey, we have some really good drivers and they're really good in four-wheel drive, and this car looks a lot like an Associated car, and we need, with our history with Jason and everything else and Brad, we need to work out a deal where we can turn this into a four-wheel drive car that's a little more affordable and has Associated support backing it.
Well, obviously our relationship with Jason Rona and Brad Relfs goes back many years. They were both very talented drivers on our race team. Both of them making many national and world finals. So working with them seemed no different than working with them on our race team. They were just very devoted team members. They saw a need. And they saw a need that we couldn't fulfill at the time because of capacity issues with our design team, and they jumped on the bandwagon and developed the BJ4. We gladly assisted them because we were looking for something for our team drivers to drive. Obviously, Associated had two-wheel drives. We didn't have a four-wheel drive. The Yokomo wasn't as competitive as it used to be. A couple of our drivers chose to drive the Yokomo, but we decided to start working with Jason and Brad on helping them develop the car. First, with them releasing it as their product, initially benefiting J Concepts, and with the long-term plans being Associated buying the design from them and actually turning it into an Associated production product.
It wasn't long before the new buggy would take its first win, with Jared Tebow leading a 1-2-3 sweep of the 2007 IFMAR Worlds in Japan. It was this moment when everybody knew the Team Associated had a true champion by design. Over the following decade, the B44 would continue to rack up win after win, along with 2 more IFMAR World titles.
He was the winner, handmade number 1! unknown here. Can he do it from 6 on a grid? Your 2013 World Champion, Stephen Hartson!
Ladies and gentlemen, oh my God! Congratulations, Stephen Hartson, Team Associated. They are going ballistic on the driver's stand.
Over the course of almost 10 years, the B44 design went virtually unchanged with only a few minor updates to improve its performance. But as tracks progressed and traction increased, the team knew a major design change was imminent. The 10-year-old design is still a contender on outdoor tracks, but on turf, carpet, and high traction clay, the B44 platform struggles to keep up.
The B44 at the Worlds last year definitely was a struggle a little bit, especially for how geared the two-wheel drives were. We really didn't have that much time to figure it out with the B44. We're more focused on with the two-wheel drive. But it was definitely a struggle, traction rolling, getting the car easy to drive around the whole track. It was something that we were just struggling to find, and we really couldn't find something, especially at the Worlds.
The slight weaknesses are the tighter 180 tracks and a little bit of the bumpier style tracks. The car definitely performs better on smoother flowing tracks. The steering radius is just not as sharp as some of the newer cars, but we just kind of have to muscle them around the track and usually get the job done.
As the traction evolved, it really got to a point to where it was not tunable enough from a roll center standpoint, weight distribution standpoint, durability, all those other types of things that really happen and what you need when the grip increases a lot.
It's just the higher grip, it seems like cars are not as easy to drive and kind of just doesn't go around the track smoothly. I mean, we went to the World Championships in Yatabe last year and we just struggled a little bit just because our cars wasn't as easy to drive and that sort of stuff. So, but I mean, apart from that, yeah, it's good everywhere else. It just seems like that high vibe stuff that's starting to slowly come into the racing scene now and getting bigger. We just need to improve on that and then have a car for every service out there.
As 2017 rolls around and the next chapter begins, it's time for a new four-wheel to take center stage.
The B44 was a really good car for us, but when it came to landing and running on high grip conditions, it just didn't cut it. We learned this first at the Worlds in Yatabe. We went there, we had some things we wanted to try and it just didn't quite work out, but we learned a lot and we've incorporated it into this new car.
Yeah, I think probably the biggest thing we learned in our testing was that how far off we were in certain conditions. Most of our running here in Southern California is on these indoor clay tracks where we've had a lot of success with the car. But as soon as you take it to a carpet race or an AstroTurf race where the surface is a little more demanding from a grip level and maybe even an inconsistency level with the undulations and stuff like that, the car really suffered. So we did some testing and some research and found that basically the limitations that we had with the B44 design is what were really holding us back, and most of that's the roll center adjustments and weight distribution, and then just recently the gear differentials and all that type of stuff that's come into play in the last 3 to 5 years. So all this is happening while we're developing the strategy and the drawings of the newest car.
I think until recently, when obviously now the tracks have changed and racing has changed greatly in the last few years, which required something completely different. The B64 has many new features. I mean, it's a new car from the ground up. The two things that stand out are the ease of maintenance and working and tuning on it, and also the range of adjustability that you have in the car.
In the beginning, our testing was a learning process on the high grip. But the things that really came out of it was all the adjustments we never had before. We have a ton of sway bars now, we have caster adjustments, kick-up adjustments, and those are honestly the things that
made the biggest difference for us on the high grip. The B64 and the B64D were set up similar to how the B6 and B60 were done. The car is the same. The main difference between the two four-wheel drives is the center. You have a gear diff in the dirt version and a slipper in the carpet version. Other than that, you just have a variety of different setup features that come with the car so it works good out of the box. Otherwise, the customer would be required to buy a whole lot of components that they don't need or have to get in order to work on their type of track. And this was the best way to give the customer the best car.
Having the ability to offer either kit to the customer lets them choose which direction they're going to go, and makes it really interchangeable and tunable for the final customer. With the B6 platform, we did a similar thing, and all those pieces are interchangeable based upon the needs that you have based upon the track.
We need more versatility and more tuning ability or tuning range in the car. We saw this coming when the B5 platform was designed, and obviously with the B6 platform, because the tracks really require two different platforms now, where the setup is different. There's several components different in it. One may want a center differential to work better on dirt tracks. The other may want a more efficient slipper device for carpet tracks, where you need all the acceleration you can get.
This car drives similar to the B44 in the fact that it's very consistent, but it is much, much easier to drive.
The B44 platform always had kind of a numb feeling to it, where the B64 is a much sharper feel. It feels more like a two-wheel drive. So when you go back and forth between the two classes, it's a much more similar feeling.
I think the expectations of our customers and racers will be very well met with the B64.
The steering input and how it reacts to certain inputs feels more similar now. The old car, you had to hustle around the track, is what people always said. You had to really push it to get the corner speed out of it. This one really flows nicely through the corner. It produces natural steering, much more similar to a two-wheel drive.
Over the last few decades, it hasn't been one individual who makes us who we are. It's taken a team to design, develop, and race championship-winning cars and trucks. Without innovation, without passion, without you, there is no team. Together, we are a team. Together, we are AE. So as we begin the next chapter in our chase for checkered flags, join us, and together, let's make history.